Hey guys, rant time again. So this is the same thing I rant about all the time. I've been ranting about this for years. I'm not going to stop. I'm going to continue to rant about this over and over and over. And I'm sure people are annoyed by now. I'm sure you guys that watch my videos, you're like, all right, dude, we get it. I get you said this a million times. We get it, dude. Shut up. All right. If that's you, sorry. You know, the thing is, there's millions of people that have not heard this message. And that's because every time I make a video, it doesn't get millions of views. You know, whatever. Maybe I need to make better videos or something like that. I don't know. But I make videos about the same thing. I rant about it. I'm actually going to go through my whole list of YouTube videos. I'm going to point you to specific videos that I've made in the past. There's at least 10 of them. I'm going to say, hey, check this one out. Check this one out. Check this one out. Check this one out. If you find yourself interested in hearing more about this and learning more about why I feel so strongly about this, so much to continue ranting and making all these videos about this, it's a very big deal, you know? Let me just start by showing you this picture real quick. Have you ever seen this picture on the internet? It gets spread around. It's a picture of David Spade, but then it has a little quote next to it. It says, better to burn out than to fade away. R.I.P. Kurt Cobain. Like, that's not Kurt Cobain. And then that quote is not from Kurt Cobain either. So, like, the whole image is just completely wrong information. But that was done on purpose. That was a calculated image. Someone made that, and they were like, I'm going to do this. And maybe they were just trying to be funny. Or maybe they're just trying to do it to get engagement, because that image gets spread around the internet and it gets lots and lots of shares. It gets lots and lots of comments. There's all kinds of people who are like, oh, that's not Kurt Cobain. That's David Spade. And then there's all kinds of people who are like, that's not a Kurt Cobain quote. That's a Neil Young quote. You know, it's obvious that that is not correct information. And for that reason, that image gets spread around the internet and it goes viral, you know. That's exactly how I feel when I see this image right here. This is the image that gets spread around the internet all the time. All the time. I just saw this image yesterday and it had like 260 shares and it had like, I don't know, hundreds of comments. Whoever made this image, congratulations to you. You got all your shares, you got your comments, you got your engagement. You're doing good, but you're sending wrong information. It's misleading information. It's not good. It's not helping anyone. You are hurting the guitar community by spreading this information around. It's bad. Now, when I look at this image, when I'm scrolling through my phone and I see this image, instantly I'm like, that's wrong. That's completely wrong. That's not right. But I've been holding back for years because I don't want to be that guy that goes and comments on someone else's picture that they made. They took the time to make the image and stuff like that. I don't want to be the guy that's like, actually, the cage system is like this. It's not like that. Like, the guy who made that image is probably a better guitar player than I am. Most people are probably better guitar players than me, you know? That's fine. So I don't want to be like commenting on these other people's work and being like, that's not the way it is. You know, that's nerdy. I don't want to do that. So for years, I just sit and I'm just like, and then I look through all the comments, the hundreds of comments. I'm like, maybe someone else will call them out on this crap that they're spreading, you know? I scroll through the comments, blah, blah, blah. No one's doing it. I see the same types of comments all the time. There's like generally 3 types of comments. One of them is like, oh, the cage system is crap. You know, you got the whole anti-cagers who are like, oh, you're going to be stuck in the cage. The cage system is crap. Music theory is for nerds, blah, 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 you know? You get those types of comments, that's whatever. They're like anti-cagers or whatever. Then you get tons and tons of comments where people are like, wow, this is amazing information. This helped me out so much. I'm going to share this with all my friends. And then they go and share it with all their friends. And then they go and share it with all their friends. And then this misinformation, this bad information is just getting spread around the internet. You know, it's like the blind leading the blind leading the blind. So that's a lot of the comments that are on this type of image. And then the third type is just the people that just don't care. They're not nerds like me. They're like, oh, yeah, you know, that's a great picture you did there. I want to move on with my life now, you know? But then you get a guy like me, and I'm sitting there like I don't get mad at politics. People are talking about Trump and Kamala Harris and all that crap all day, like, oh, Trump this. I don't care. Kamala Harris this. I don't care. You know, whatever. I don't care about politics. It doesn't trigger me. Everyone else gets triggered by that stuff. Everyone's like yelling at each other. But I'm scrolling and I see this image. I'm like, I get all red and stuff. Veins start popping out of my head. But I hold myself back, you know? I don't say anything. I'm like, I'm not going to do it today. I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to let it go. I'll do some push-ups or something just to get the anger out of me. That's the kind of triggering it. But anyway, so yesterday I had a bad day, you know? I had a bad day yesterday. Nothing was going my way. Whatever. I wasn't in a good mood. Scrolling through my phone, I see this image. I'm like, so I made a comment. I left a comment. Here's the comment that I made. All right, so that's not a terrible comment, you know. I still kind of stepped in with my little nerdiness, and I was like, well, actually, the cage system is like this, you know. You know, so hey, it is what it is, you know. But it wasn't really, I don't think I was really being too offensive to the person. Of course, the person took offense to it, and they replied back to me with like a passive-aggressive, long paragraph telling me in a nice way about how much I don't know, how much I don't understand, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to fault the person for that because people comment on my stuff a lot too. They're like, well, actually, it's like this. And I respond the same way. I respond in a passive-aggressive way, and I'm like, nah, I don't know. Everyone's getting in these nerdy comment argument fights or whatever. But anyway, point being is, I don't know. So yesterday was the day I said something. Then I went and I posted that same image in the Facebook group, the Zombie Guitar Members Facebook group, and I just laid out a little rant in there, you know? And I don't know, I'm making a video about it today because this is not doing anyone any good. This image is crap. It's complete and utter crap. It's not helping you. It's not the cage system. You're not learning the cage system. If you learn these 5 scale patterns, cool, that's awesome. You're not learning the cage system, okay? As a guy who makes these videos and stuff like that, there's three big things that get lots of views. Like if I want to make a YouTube video and I'm like, you know what, today I feel like making a video that's going to get more views than my other videos. All I have to do is put the word pentatonic in the title and it's going to get at least twice as many views as a lot of my other videos. Or I have to put the word caged in the title and it's going to get like twice as many views. Or I put the word modes in the title because these are hot topics in the guitar community. Pentatonic, caged, and modes. So everyone is interested in this stuff. Everyone's trying to learn about the pentatonic scale, the cage system, and modes, blah, blah, blah. So the thing is, when I see this picture and it's just completely obvious to me, I'm like, no, that's not right at all. That's completely wrong. It's that instant, the same way that I look at that picture, I'm like, that's not Kurt Cobain, that's David Spade, and that's not a Kurt Cobain quote. The reason I see that so obvious and not everyone else does is because there's millions of people out there that are trying to learn the cage system. It's a hot topic. There's millions of people that are trying to learn the cage system, but they don't know what they don't know. They've been led by the blind, who is led by the blind, who is led by the blind. And they're just spreading around this misinformation. They don't know what they don't know, you know? So they see it and they're like, oh, wow, thank you, sir. Thank you for taking the time to make this nice, colorful image. Thank you. I'm going to save this on my hard drive, and then I'm going to go home and I'm going to learn the cage system. And then I'm going to tell my buddies to learn the cage system too, and I'm going to share the image with them. And it's just the blind leading the blind leading the blind. Just because you learned that these 5 patterns connect together and you can kind of weave in and out of them, and it allows you to play in one single key, that does not mean you learned the cage system. You didn't even scratch the surface. You didn't touch the cage system. The cage system is not about scale patterns. Like a big thing that a lot of people are trying to figure out on the guitar, it's a very big thing. They're trying to take the diatonic scale, which is just the key scale for any given key. Another name for the diatonic scale is the major scale. Another name for the diatonic scale is the natural minor scale. There's a bunch of different names for the diatonic scale. It's just easier if we just call it the diatonic scale. So a lot of people are trying to map out the 7 notes of any given key across the fretboard. And that forms this one gigantic pattern. And now that one gigantic pattern is going to be exactly the same for all keys on the guitar. But it's a big giant pattern. It's a big giant matrix of notes. Now, a lot of people that are newer to the guitar are trying to learn this big giant pattern. And a way that we learn this big giant pattern is by breaking it down into smaller patterns. Now, there's a few different ways that you can do this. You can break it down into 7 smaller patterns, which is very often confused with modes. You can break it down into 5 smaller patterns, which is very commonly confused with the cage system. And then the way that I prefer to do it is to just break it down into 3 smaller patterns, but that doesn't get confused with anything. No one ever talks about the 3 pattern system because there's nothing to confuse it with. Everyone's talking about the cage system and modes and stuff, when in reality they aren't even talking about the cage system. And they're not even talking about modes. They're just talking about breaking down the big giant diatonic scale pattern into smaller chunks that are easier to memorize. So this image is just the diatonic scale broken down into 5 smaller patterns. That's it. Now, when someone gets this image, They play pattern number 1, and then they play pattern number 2, and they're like, whoa, these patterns go together. I'm getting somewhere on the guitar. And then they put pattern number 3 next to it, and they're like, whoa, I'm almost covering the whole fretboard. And then they realize that once they put all 5 of those patterns together, they're like, dude, I can play across the whole fretboard and key. In other words, they can play the notes of the diatonic scale for the key that they're trying to play in and use the whole fretboard in doing so. That's great. That's a great thing. A lot of people are trying to accomplish that goal. But that is not the cage system. You didn't use the cage system to get there. You don't understand the cage system. You may think that you know the cage system, which causes a problem, because then you're going to go about your life thinking that you know something, and then 5 years down the road, when you hit the time where you're like, you know what, it's time I got to start keeping up with those chord changes. I've just been playing in key the whole time, noodling in the scale patterns. All my leads are starting to sound the same. All my phrases are starting to sound the same. I really got to start paying attention to those chords that I'm soloing over right now. That's what the cage system's for. But I already know the cage system, so I'm not even going to bother looking into that, because I've already learned the cage system. I already know that stuff. You see, these patterns are just arbitrarily labeled. You can call them pattern 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if you want. You can call them pattern A, B, C, D, E if you want. You can call them pattern green, red, yellow, blue, orange if you want. You can call them by your favorite animal names, like that's the monkey pattern, and that's the dog pattern, and that's the elephant pattern, and that's the cat pattern, and that's the lion pattern. You can do that. The internet, the misinformation spread around the internet, people are like, oh, well, that's the C pattern, that's the A pattern, that's the G pattern, that's the E pattern, that's the D pattern. That's the cage system. No, it's not the cage system. You have just arbitrarily labeled these 5 smaller patterns, which all go together to form one larger pattern that covers the fretboard. It's not the cage system. People do the same thing when they take the one larger pattern and they break it down into 7 smaller patterns. They're like, oh, well, that's the Ionian pattern, that's the Dorian pattern, Phrygian pattern, Lydian pattern, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian pattern. They assign these arbitrary labels using mode names. You could also say it's pattern 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You could say it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G pattern, label them as colors, whatever. People incorrectly assign mode names to the 7 pattern way of breaking the diatonic scale down, and then they go about their life thinking that they understand modes, and then they tell their friends to learn their modes, and then they learn the modes the wrong way. And then you have this, I made lots of videos about this mode stuff too. Oh my god. All right, anyway, so the second issue is when you learn these 5 patterns and you think that you're learning the cage system, you're hurting yourself in the long run, because you're attaching a caged chord shape, because that's what the cage system is about. It's about chord shapes. It's not about scale patterns. It's 2 different things. You have chord shapes and you have scale patterns. They're 2 different objectives, 2 different goals. I mean, everything all kinds of fit together to make pretty beautiful music, but when learning the guitar, chord shapes is a different learning objective than scale patterns, 2 completely different things that should be learned independently of one another. When you learn the cage system in the way that this chart is showing you, then you are attaching a caged chord shape to a specific scale pattern. But that is not always going to be the scale pattern that is surrounding that specific chord shape. For example, if you look at this image, you look at the first pattern. He's calling this the C pattern, right? The reason he's calling this the C pattern is because the E major chord, right? He's breaking down the E major scale, right? So this is the diatonic scale for the key of E major. Take your E major scale, boom, map that out across the fretboard. That's a big, complicated pattern. Let me break that down into 5 smaller patterns. Okay, 5 smaller patterns. He took the E major scale, he broke it down into 5 smaller patterns. The first of those patterns he's calling the C pattern. The E major chord, which happens to be the 1 chord in the key of E major. Remember, any key has 7 chords in it. In the key of E major, the E major chord is the 1 chord. The E major chord forms the C shape in this first pattern, which he is referring to as the C pattern. And then the surrounding scale notes are the rest of the notes of the E major scale. So this is an instance where the E major chord has a surrounding scale pattern that is the E major scale pattern. That's great. That's going to work every time you find yourself in the key of E major and you are playing on the 1 chord, which is an E major chord. What if you're playing in the key of A major, for example? If you're in the key of A major, there's still an E major chord found in that key, except the E major chord is now the 5 chord in that key, right? So you can still be using this E major shape, this E major chord shape found in this C shape, but the surrounding scale notes are going to be different. The surrounding scale notes are going to be the notes of the A major scale because you're playing in the key of A major. The context has changed. The E major chord in the C shape has not changed because that's what the cage system information gives you, but the surrounding scale pattern has changed. So you have already, maybe you haven't, but I'm saying if you are one of those people that has associated this specific scale pattern with the C shape, that means every time you have a chord in the C shape, you're going to be like, oh, I know the surrounding notes. I know that already. Okay, but that's great. But if you're not in the key of E major, then it doesn't work anymore. You're going to be hitting sour notes. Or what if you're playing in the key of B major? If you're playing in the key of B major contains an E major chord as well, but now E major is the 4 chord in that key. Again, you could be playing your E major chord in the C shape, but the surrounding notes are going to be the notes of the B major scale. It's a different context yet. So depending on the context that the chord is being used in, is going to dictate the surrounding scale pattern around the caged chord shape. This image is only showing you the surrounding scale patterns if you are in the key of E major and you are on an E major chord, which is the 1 chord. Since all of the keys on the guitar share the same exact patterns and stuff like that, the same connection will apply to any key. If you're in the key of A major and you're on the A major chord, then this image will work. If you're in the key of C major and you're on the C major chord, then this image will work. The problem arises when you are on any other chord other than the 1 chord in the key. When you're playing music that is in one single key, the scale patterns remain constant. You have your big diatonic scale, which you can break down into smaller patterns. You can break it down into 5 patterns if you want. Let's just go with that. But those scale patterns remain constant. But the chords are constantly changing, because there's a chord progression going on. If all of the chords are part of the same key, your scale patterns do not change, but the chords change. That means that the shapes of each chord change. You can play a chord progression in any one of these patterns. Let's just look at the first pattern. In any one of these patterns, you can play a full chord progression using the nearest available caged chord shapes. Because remember, the cage system is about chord shapes, it is not about scale patterns. Let's say that we're playing in the key of E major, and we want to play a 1, 4, 5 progression in the key of E major, all confined to this one single scale pattern. The scale pattern is going to remain the same because the key is not changing, but the chord shapes within the scale pattern are going to change. So a 1, 4, 5 progression in the key of E major is going to be an E major chord, A major chord, B major chord. All right. So within this scale pattern, you already know your E major chord shape. That's the 1 chord shape that's found in the C shape. When the chord progression then moves to the 4 chord, which in this case is the A major chord, you're then going to find the A major chord in the E shape. The E shape, it's right within this pattern. When the chord progression then moves to the 5 chord, which in this case is the B major chord, you're going to find the B major chord in the G shape. Okay, so we're calling this pattern the C pattern because the 1 chord is found in the C shape, but the 4 chord is not found in the C shape, the 5 chord is not found in the C shape. So every time you make a connection to a caged chord shape and you say, oh, that's the surrounding scale pattern that always is the way it is, it's going to cause issues when you are playing on a chord that is not the 1 chord. This is going to cause problems. I'm telling you, it's going to cause problems because you've already attached a scale pattern to a caged chord shape. It's hard to explain to people that don't get this, because you don't know what you don't know. And there's so much information out there. There's so much crap being spread around. So you don't know what you don't know. You do not attach a caged chord shape to a scale pattern because it's not always going to be the same scale pattern. It's more often than not, it's going to be a different scale pattern every time. Sometimes you're going to be playing on the 1 chord. Sometimes you're going to be playing on the 4 chord. Sometimes you're going to be playing on the 5 chord. The cage system is about chord shapes. It's not about scale patterns. Never was, never will be. You're trying to extract information out of something that's just not there. All right, so if you want to dive deeper into this whole cage misconception thing, I'm going to walk you through my YouTube channel and show you some other videos to check out. I've dived very deep into this. I've talked about it over and over and over and over. I've been teaching the cage system the exact same way ever since I started this YouTube channel, but it just became it was brought into my awareness 4 years ago, which is when I made this video, the most comprehensive cage lesson ever. This video was in direct response to something else I saw, which was like a huge cage learning resource. I'm not going to call anyone out. Everyone's doing their own thing, you know, trying to do their best to teach others. You don't know what you don't know, but that video was a prime example of the blind leading the blind, and there was millions of views and millions of comments, and I'm just like, ugh. So I made this video in response right here. This was the very first one I made. This is about 45 minutes long. Let's go and see where I started to rant about this stuff some more. Here we go. This is why the cage system doesn't make sense for some people. So I talk about it in this video as well. Someone made a comment on that video and they were like, oh, well, the cage system is a way to connect to the pentatonic scale patterns. The cage system is not meant for connecting scale patterns. That's only going to confuse you. It's only going to hinder you in the long run. So in my response to that comment, I then made this video, the 5 cage shapes versus the 5 pentatonic positions, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So you may want to check that one out as well. And here's another video. I might as well just point this one out because, I don't know, people like the Sultans of Swing, so I'm kind of like, oh, here's how you can kind of identify these caged chord shapes as used in the Sultans of Swing. Whether Mark Knopfler was thinking caged or not, I don't really know, but I'm just saying if you do want to think caged and kind of see how that applies to Sultans of Swing, that's a good video. No ranting going on there, but there is a lot more ranting, so let me find those videos where I'm ranting about this. Oh, the magic in the cage system that you didn't even know existed, that's a rant about the same thing, if you want to check that one out. So this video right here, the minor cage system, this isn't a rant, but it was in response to a question that someone had regarding the minor cage system. They're like, well, what do you do? The cage system is just about major chords. You know, what about for minor chords? So that's pretty important to know. So if you kind of just want to get on board with this whole cage is about chord shapes and it's not about scale patterns, once you start getting into that mindset, like we're talking about chord shapes here, you can then take these major chord shapes and turn them into minor chords, and that's what this video is about. Here's a rant here, the wrong way to use the cage system. This is the one that I linked that person to, that I commented on their image. I said, you know, I linked to that video, blah, 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 check that out. There's another video about how to use the cage system to play complex chord progressions. It doesn't have to just be major chords and minor chords. You can play all kinds of chords, you know, all kinds of extended chords, all kinds of stuff, you know. So that's what that video is about. I think I ranted some more, maybe not, I don't know. That may have been the end of my rant. Oh, the cage drama explained. I think that's just about people just complaining about learning music theory or guitar systems in general. I don't know, that's not really about this specific rant, but hey, it's a fun video to check out anyway. You know, I got 3.2 thousand views. Let's see if we can get that up to 3.3 thousand views. All right, let's see what else we got. Well, that's it. All right, so yeah, there's about 6-7 videos that you can check out if you want to kind of dive deeper into this whole caged idea, whatever. So thank you. Watch my other videos, guys. Or don't, I don't know. But if you want to learn about this, if you really, really want to dive into why I care so much about this, if you really, really want to understand why I just keep on ranting and raving about this and why I feel so strongly about this, it's because it's bad stuff. It's not helping anyone. Not helping anyone. It's only hurting people. It's hurting millions of guitar players. I know this because I deal with many, many confused people on a daily basis. Anyway, guys, I think I've ranted enough here. I'm sure I could go on about this for hours on end because I'm just a huge nerd and this stuff just bothers me to no end that this crap gets spread around the internet. I'm just going to cut it off here. So if you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you want to tell me I'm an idiot, whatever, just leave it all down in the comment section below. I'll be happy to answer. I'll be happy to provide links of other videos that I've made that go into much more detail about this stuff. But just please, please, if you're going to take anything from this video, take this. The cage system is not about scale patterns. That's it. Okay? Have a good one.